Awesome. So we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Leadership Activators podcast. I'm Carol Issa. For those of you who know me already, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us, whether you are on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, which is actually what I'm looking at right now. We're thrilled to have you. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a former sound engineer turned professional coach for leaders and entrepreneurs. And I truly believe that it's so important to create your life, because if there's just one idea that you could grab from each episode, that would be awesome, because it could turn your life around. So with every episode, I bring you a special guest or message to help you enable the leader in you and live life on your terms. I trust that you'll enjoy today's episode, and thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being you. Today, I have a very special guest, Brett Trainor. Actually, I met Brett earlier this year, or I think it was last year, actually. Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, I
Been
know
a
it's
long
flying by.
time. Yeah. And I've been on your podcast, which was a great experience, the Corporate Escapee. And our title today and our focus subject today is how is it that we can move away or escape the 9 to 5 grind? So thank you so much, Brett, for joining me in this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited for this. So thank you for having me.
Awesome, beautiful. So Brett, can you tell us more about your background and what is it that you do and who you help?
Yeah, we don't have that much time, but the short version of it is, you can guess by the Corporate Escapee that I spent the majority of my career, which is now 30 plus years, on enterprise and the corporate side, working for companies. Periodically, I would jump into the entrepreneurial space, but always ended up back in corporate. Well, and about 4 years ago, I just hit that breaking point. I said, there's got to be more, right? What am I doing? I wasn't excited to get up on Monday morning. And I went out on my own and kind of found a path over the last 4 years, started doing some consulting, which I was doing management consulting before I left the corporate world. Realized that, man, that's not really what I want to do, and kind of fell into more of a fractional leadership type of a role. But then found a group of folks that were very similar to me, that were just done with the corporate life, right? We're working for somebody else. We're working on somebody else's time. And I kind of, I'll almost say accidentally came across the Corporate Escapee, right? That, hey, we still got, I don't know, depending on how old and where you are in your career, 30, 40, or 50 years left. And is it really what we want to do? Working 8 hours a day, commuting in some cases, and spending most of your time working for somebody else? Or do you want to find your own path, take control, and move on? So yeah, I started the Corporate Escapee podcast. That's about 4 years ago. It's gone through a few name changes as my business has grown. And then just recently started a community for fellow corporate escapees to get together. And so that's really become my passion, is to say, hey, life's too short to go through the motions. So figure out what motivates you, what gets you excited, and go find that path. So maybe a little more than you were looking for, but hopefully that was a little bit of
Awesome. Oh my God, I'm impressed because I know a lot about your background. I'm like, whoa, great summarization skills. Love it. Straight to the point. So I have a few questions that are popping in my mind at the moment. I'm just going to go with one. So usually people I meet who actually decided to leave their 9 to 5 world, even if it was a very successful one with a lot of perks and a lot of comfort and all of that, there's usually a defining moment that they remember where things shifted for them and they actually made that decision, because it takes a lot of courage to make that decision and leave the comfort zone. I'm wondering, what was that defining moment for you?
Yeah, it wasn't one specific. It was kind of a perfect storm of 2 or 3 things that kind of came together, because I had left a corporate role, ended up in management consulting, which I actually enjoyed. It was leading, digital transformation and, just some disagreements with management and how we should handle an account in a direction that we should go. And earlier in my career, I would have been like, that's fine. I spoke my mind, but I'll follow leadership's role and move on. But at this point, I'm like, I knew it wasn't the right thing. I'm like, maybe I'm getting too old for this. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. or I didn't believe it was the right thing. So I didn't want to be a part of that. And then two, one things that management consulting taught me was what my worth was in the marketplace, which, I wasn't getting working through a management consulting firm. So it was kind of the combination of those two things that said, man, I think I can go out and do this myself now, because my other ventures into the entrepreneurial space was actually building a company or going to work for a company. But I really didn't have the desire to build, the next Facebook or Google or even a manufacturing. And I didn't realize what alternatives were actually out there. So when I went out on my own, it was, hey, I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing, but just on my own pace. And quickly found that there's a much bigger community. I mean, you did the same thing, right? You not only did you leave a job, you left the country to go start your own thing. So so I think long answer to your question, it was a number of things. I just didn't want to play the game anymore. And I knew that I could do this on my own. And it was just, I needed to drive towards something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. It's amazing. And it still takes a lot of courage to do so, especially after so many years of being successful in the corporate world. Oh my God, that takes a lot of courage. I'm wondering, in the early stages when you left your 9-to-5 world and started your own business, what were the key challenges that you have faced, and how is it that you have overcome them?
Yeah, I think when I first left, I was kind of doing the same thing. So it was really more consulting. And I just got to the point where that wasn't the most value I could add, right? It wasn't managing a spreadsheet or a project plan. There's people probably much better than me to do that. And where my value I started to find was in my experience, right? That just based on what I had done in the corporate world, I had run teams in sales, I'd run teams in marketing, I'd run teams in, customer success and even customer service. So I kind of had a good look at how organizations should run, or probably more accurately, how they shouldn't run, with silos and those types of things. So I thought I could move that there. But what I found quickly was I was just doing the same thing, but just on my own. So I was managing some of the overhead. And it wasn't until I kind of accidentally found what the fractional, I don't know if you guys use that term, but more of a part-time executive leadership role was kind of where my niche was. And once I hit that, I'm like, I can do this. This is where my value is. There's value to the companies that I'm working with. But yeah, in the early days, it was a hustle. It was kind of the same thing. And because as you know, you're selling, you're delivering, right? You're starting to build up.
Wearing so many different hats at once. Yeah,
exactly. And it really didn't start. So I'm in year 4 now, and it really didn't start to slow down into year 2 when things got into a rhythm. I was able to manage my work. I could look ahead to the business development side, think about the marketing side, and really what I wanted to do long term. That's what I didn't do when I started, and I wish I would have, is what do I really want? What do I want out of next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? And it was just more, what am I going to do the next, 30 days? And until I sat down and thought about it, that really helped. And I know people talk about, what's your why and your North Star, but it actually really is important. And I probably now, worked with and probably interviewed over 100 other corporate escapees at this point. And it's kind of the same thing. We all just got to that breaking point. We all kind of want different things. But what was interesting is, I would say maybe 1 out of 100, the driver was money. Everything else everybody was kind of like, I want the flexibility, the freedom, the control. Now you got to pay your bills, so you need the financial side of it, but it's really trying to coordinate or pull all those things into one, which was the biggest challenge. And I think that's where the folks that leave corporate end up going back, guilty as charged, earlier in my career, is we couldn't figure out how to balance that.
Yeah, which is a big skill to learn, and we hit hurdle after hurdle. I can totally relate to this. It's funny that you mentioned earlier the importance of finding our why and our purpose, and it's not clear from the get-go. This morning I had a notification on my phone. I use a journal app, and it says 7 years ago you wrote this, and I looked at it, and at the time it was Alephpreneur, the name of the company, not Leadership Activators. And it
Oh,
said,
yeah.
oh my God, I ate so many Smarties just to figure out my purpose with Alepreneur. And it was so funny. It was like a year or so into it, like 7 years ago. So yeah,
That's
I
kind of
don't eat
crazy.
Smarties
That's
anymore that
that's
much.
kind of cool that you still have those notes. I wish I would have done that. I'm probably like 4 years into my notes, so I can go back and look. But it'd have been really interesting to go back 10 years and see what I know I wasn't documenting it, so actually I have no idea what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's funny like to look back and have a laugh, because sometimes we forget how far we have come. Yeah. Um, for you, and with the different people that you have met, there's something that I keep coming across in this world of entrepreneurship and promoting freedom and leaving the 9 to 5 job, is that the entrepreneurial journey is not for everyone.
Right.
So, in your perspective, and based on the people you meet, your journey so far, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because it depends on how you define entrepreneurial, right? I mean,
Yeah.
before this, I'm like, well, you want to start a company, or you're going to go raise funds and you want to start, right? You're going to venture capital, or you want to build a company. And what really opened my eyes, it was probably about 3 years ago, was folks building, 7-figure, $1 million businesses with no employees. I'm like, that's interesting, right? You don't have to, not that there's anything wrong with managing team and having employees, but at certain stage that just may not be what you want to do. And I
Yeah.
think the misconception is that if you leave corporate, you've got to build this company, you've got to manage, you've got to do all these things, you got to have the next great idea in order to, be successful. And it's just not the case. And once I discovered that there's value in the experience, right? So when I talk about, like, if you got 10 years of experience in corporate, even 5 would be enough. But if you got 20 or 30 years of experience and somebody's paying you a salary to do your job, there's somebody that's going to pay you to help them. I mean, there's just no doubt you have the experience and knowledge that there's folks out there. And I think 3, maybe even 5 years ago, it would have been much harder to find those companies that were looking for that help. They're all over the place now. They're starting to realize that, wow, I can't afford a full-time person, but I can get somebody that's done this for 30 years to come in on a part-time or a fractional basis and help my company. Yeah, sign me
Mm-hmm.
up. One of the
Yeah.
CEOs, and I've been using this phrase quite a lot lately because I love it, is she said, I'd rather have an A player 50% of the time than a B player 100% of the time. And I think that's where kind of call it the rallying cry for the corporate escapees is, look, we've got all this experience. We know how to do our jobs, and we're skilled in these areas. And there's a lot of companies that need that help, especially the small and mid-sized companies that, again, can't afford to bring somebody in full-time, but man, if you could help them with your experience. And the interesting thing, what I'm finding, it's not just, I think traditionally when we thought freelancers, it was design, right? Fiverr,
Yes.
these other things, and then
Yeah.
chief marketing officers and sales. But there's really fractional people from manufacturing all the way into project management. You name a corporate role, and there's a fractional role that people are willing to pay for it. Now they want to pay for that experience, and they don't want to pay for the overhead. So I think that's one of the biggest things that's starting to change is the fear that, well, if I go on my own, nobody's going to hire me, right? Which I 100% get. And, I think the other misconception is people think, well, if I leave corporate, and the analogy I use, if you leave corporate, the risk is you're walking a tightrope across skyscrapers, right? 50 stories in the air. The fact is you're 12 inches off the ground, right? If it doesn't work and you don't get your fractional role, you don't get the second fractional role, you can go back to corporate. They're still going to hire you back. So the risk is actually really low in order for you to get the confidence to go out and basically take control. I used to say when I started this, I thought it was more about take control of the career and the finances and run it. But it's really more of a take control of your life, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
the work fits into it. And it's just, you go back to what is it that you want? it's everything that you're looking for. So, and if you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I'm like, no, it's all about the work and the money. But I'm like, now I'm completely not just bought in, I completely understand the full 360 of, life, right? I mean, this is everything that you want to do. So anyway, as you can tell, I'm passionate and I'm all in on this journey to try to help people get there.
Absolutely. I love the fact that you're not only working as a consultant to choose the different gigs that you want to be part of and finding the right fit for you. You are also helping other people do the same for themselves. So I love this contributing back also to the greater good aspect of your business. When I think about corporate, I think it's a bit of a term that is used loosely. And usually there's this other word that comes with that is attached, corporate America, as if it started there and then it spread across the world. When you talk about escaping the corporate world, what is it that you mean?
I think at the highest level, it's you're going to work every day for somebody else. They're kind of dictating what you're going to do, what your output's going to be. You may have some control or flexibility in what you're doing, but at the end of the day, those 8 hours, 5 days a week, you're working for somebody else. Yep, you may get paid a nice salary. There's some benefits, but at the end of the day, you're not driving towards anything that you want to drive towards. So when I tell people, but again, for some folks, that's exactly what they want. It works for their lifestyle. I'm like, 100% go for it. That's perfect. But the people I talk to, that's not the way they feel, right? They're burned out. They're tired. They don't want to do this anymore. I mean, if you don't want to wake up on Monday and go to work, then the job's probably not for you, right? That type of thing. And I just think we get to a certain point, and I think where the world's going, so it's going to change. The expertise market, and you call it knowledge workers or whatever you want to call. I've heard a term the other day that I like, which is, kind of expertise as a service, right? EAS, expertise as a service, something like that. But it makes sense, right? Because we do have certain skills that we can play into it, and it plugs into, well, I would say the organizations of the future. Because when I started this, it was really around, what pays the bills for me is the fractional work and working with these small and mid-sized companies to help drive their growth. But the passion became, say, I know there's more of me out there. There's just maybe just needs that little nudge or the reassurance or coaching or whatever it is that, yes, you can take this leap. There is, another side. And that's where I think back to your original question of what is, big corporate or corporate America. It's when you're not doing anything for yourself, and 80% of your day is probably not value add. You're in meetings that you don't need to be in. You see all the memes about people that set up things to move their Zoom so it looks like they're active. I mean, if that's the case, is that what you want out of your career? I'm guessing probably not.
Yeah, like the spiral goes down.
Exactly.
Standards. Yeah, I hear you. And it affects every single aspect of their life too. Because it's funny, we don't realize until we do that we spend most of our time like at the office or at the desk or doing this thing called work. And then there are so many different aspects in our life that are completely ignored. And I think this is where the wake-up call is this how you want to live the rest of your life? Is this how you want to design and create your life? And this is where things start to shift. You touched on two things in terms of the key objections that people have when they're looking to take the leap and find it challenging. Number one is, how is it that I'm going to leave the 9-to-5 world, which is comfortable, having a salary and all of that, trusting myself that I'm going to be able to make it because I'm used to doing just the one thing or the three things that I'm asked to do. And the other thing is, okay, let's say I have overcome that fear and I trust myself that I'm going to take the leap. There is something that I hear a lot. If I fail, then I'm going to be sort of ashamed to come back to the corporate world or to work for someone else saying, hey, I've tried to go on my own and now I'm back. So how is it that you reframe this type of mindset, and what is it that you have to say around that?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point. And like, I'm guilty of it, right? Over the course of my career, like I said, I kind of ebbed and flowed into the entrepreneurial world and then back into the safety of corporate because it has benefits and it's safe. But at the end of the day, is it really that much safer? We see all the layoffs, especially in big tech. Now, McDonald's here is laying off quite a few of their corporate folks. And, I just think it's, and maybe it's an age thing. We kind of, at least we kind of grew up that the safe thing is going to corporate, pay your dues, get to the promotion, get to the next level. And then what? I'm like, I think what tipped it for me was I don't plan on retiring. I cannot see myself sitting around the house watching TV or doing whatever. So I'm going to work until I can't work anymore. So I might as well be doing something that I want to do, right? And I think going back to what your question, I went on a little tangent there, but was, the work's out there. And, one of the other taglines that I use, it's easier to find your first customer than your next job. And you think about when you've been laid off, I'm sure most of the folks listening to your podcast have been, or they're worried about it, and you've had to look for a job. You really have to know somebody or be connected into that next company that's going to get you in there. It's not easy, but if you would literally take the same approach as you're interviewing and networking with folks and think about, that you're open for fractional or contract work, you'd be surprised at how many people would be available for and open to having that kind.
I think that we lost you, Brett. There is a bit of a problem with the connection at the moment. So sorry, guys, who are listening to us at the moment. I think that Brett is having some challenges with his connection. We'll wait for him until he's back. And I trust that you're enjoying the conversation so far. Fingers crossed, Brett will be back in a short while. In the meantime, I would love it if you could send me your questions if you have some questions that you'd like to ask Brett. I'm looking at the moment at the Facebook feed and the LinkedIn feed. And if you can share your questions, that would be awesome. I'm just going to go offline for 30 seconds exactly, just to make sure that Brett is okay and that he's going to be back with us shortly. In the meantime, would love it if you could post your questions either on the Facebook feed or the LinkedIn feed. Thank you so much for being patient with us while we get this tech world checked. I'm going to stay on camera. I'm just going to mute myself just to make sure that Brett is okay. Just 30 seconds. All right. Still waiting to hear back from Brett. I'm looking at the LinkedIn feed at the moment and the Facebook feed. So if you have any questions, would love to see them so that I can ask them to Brett once he's back. I'm really hoping that he's not having a big issue with his internet connection. Otherwise, you might have to wait for him to be back and then go live again. So yeah, still waiting to hear from him. It looks like, yeah, he doesn't have connection because he's still offline here. Okay, guys, so here's what we're gonna do. If you want to go for a quick break, I don't know, toilet break, drink or anything like that, just go for it now until we figure out what's going on. I'm gonna just mute myself again, try to give Brett a call. Oh, there he is. Woohoo! All right, awesome, cool. There he is, beautiful. Don, I just saw your question popping on my feed. I'm just going to have a quick look, make sure that I can see it again. Yeah, there it is. Beautiful. Okay, make sure to ask the question. Hey, Brett, welcome back. Can you hear
I'm
me?
not sure if I think I lost my Wi-Fi, but I just hooked up through my
Whoops.
iPhone's hotspot. So hopefully we're good. I think that was my
Awesome.
apologies. I have no idea what happened.
All good. No worries. Welcome back. It's great that you're back. So yeah, I was just trying to figure out what's going on. So we have actually a question from the audience, but before we go there, where were we? So let's finish the question that we
I think I
started
was on
there.
the best point I had of the night, and it was breakthroughs for everybody. And then
Hi.
first, no, I
Okay,
think we
it's
were.
done. It's over.
We'll just leave the cliffhanger. We'll come back for part two. No, I think it's just getting over the fear of doing it, and I think it's just reframing the concern about it. That look, when you have these conversations with folks and you're interviewing for a job or looking for a job, throw it out there that you're open for, fractional type work, but to be super specific about the type of work you do. For me, I'm looking for chief growth officer so I can help CEOs in $2 to $25 million companies with strategic initiatives around customer touch points. Because when I talk to you, you'll remember, I'm like, oh yeah, Brett, he does this. But if I were to come in and said I can do 15 different things, you'll never remember me to remind it. So my point is, be very clear of where your skill set is, what you want to do to get started, because all you're trying to do is create some momentum out of the box, and you will be surprised at the opportunities that are out there. And what I would say one step above that is like what I'm doing with Corporate Escapee. I think I've identified, when I started this, I thought there's like 4 revenue streams, like 4 ways you can make money. I think I'm up to 14, and I'm sure there's ways now that I'm not thinking of, between coaching, fractional, interim leadership. And the other beauty is there's more and more communities starting to pop up around too. Like, so if fractional is the path you really want to go, there's a number of folks that are focused on fractional that will help you, and are kind of connecting businesses with fractional folks. If you want to do consulting, there's people focused on consulting. If you want to go into franchise, there's people that can help you with franchises. So there's a lot of support out there that I didn't realize that was even out there. So if anybody's thinking about it or nervous about it, I'm more than happy to have a conversation and just point people in the right direction. But I think the thing to remember is you can always go back to corporate, right? That next job will be out there, but it doesn't hurt to start to poke around. If you have a job and you're curious and you're not happy with where you're at, look around and see what you can find. And I really truly believe that in the next couple of years, we're going to see a big change in the number of folks that in that fractional type of world, consulting world, that are going to find jobs if they want them, right? It's just going to become more and more mainstream, where before you really had to work to find those type of roles. So maybe the last thing I'll leave, if it's okay, can I add one more thing?
Go for it.
Because the analogy that I use for folks, because I think and we a lot of people say future of work, right? Blah, blah, blah. And where I think it's going, if you've been in the corporate world, which, it's very siloed, right? There's operation budgets, people do these things. And I really believe where we're going is more of an ecosystem of specialists, right? So if you have a company and you need a full-time chief marketing officer, because that's 80% of your business, 100% hire that person full-time. But you may have a bunch of other specialists that you don't need them full-time. And the analogy I was using before was, like a blockbuster movie, right? You got actors, you got makeup, you got stunts, you got script, all these people come together to build this thing, and then the output, and then they go their separate ways, and they may work again. So I think we're going to see that. And then somebody shared, if you've seen the movie Ocean's 11, right, where they're going to rob the casino.
Yeah.
And what did he need? He needed a team. He needed I don't think he had a makeup person, but he needed a disguise guy. He needed a weapons guy. I just think we're going to see more and more of that. And the beauty, I think the other thing that I would leave the audience with that is, people are willing to pay, right, for your experience. I think we undercharge a lot of the times, But if you're comfortable with it, they'll pay because they want to pay for the experience. They just don't want to pay for the overhead. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where we're fractional wage. So, kind of again, long-winded answer to get to your question. I just think the risk is pretty low for folks. You can always go back to corporate, and more companies, especially the small and mid-size, are starting to embrace bringing in specialists like this because they can understand how to leverage them, where if you think about a big corporation, they can't even manage their own employees, let alone bringing in an ecosystem of specialists to do it. So
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt to try. Like I said, you can always go back, and like I said, the risk is pretty low.
Love it. It's funny, you actually answered the next question I had, which was about where is it that you see in corporate America going with the new model that is being established now slowly and gradually. Don, who's actually watching us live, just shared the question. Are there any roles that aren't a good fit for fractional work?
Or not, or
question.
Or no,
Are not.
I think everything's fractional. I mean, or could be, just depending on the organization that you're looking at. Because I look at it from, if you're a HubSpot specialist or a Salesforce specialist, right? There may be organizations that don't need somebody full time, but really need somebody to come in and help them do that. So I think any role that you would see, again, I'll go back to any role that somebody's willing to pay you a salary for, there's a fractional opportunity for. And like I said, where it used to be just marketing and design, it's going to be across the board, right? I see process people. I'm actually interviewing somebody on my podcast tomorrow that's a fractional operations in a manufacturing facility. Who knew? I mean, I thought manufacturing, that's pretty very specific to what they do. No, but there's a number of small companies that bring him in to help them on a fractional basis get their operations owner manufacturing. So I think if you have a skill, there's a company that's willing to pay you for it.
Awesome. So I trust that, Don, this answers your question. That was an awesome question, by the way. Love it. Brett, when we leave our 9-to-5 world, there is this sense where we need to lead the way and forge our own path. I'm not sure about you, but for me, it was something that I had to straight away embrace and run with it. And the more I doubted myself, the less likely I was to create the results that I was after. And the more I was developing my self-leadership skills along the way, the more likely I was to move forward and faster. So my question is, when you think about the word leadership, which is very nebulous, right? It means different things to different people. What does the word leadership mean to you?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because that's interesting. Because I think it's changed over time, right? And I think the traditional sense is, oh, leader, I've got a team, I've got people I need to manage, right? And leadership and management may be two different things. And, what I found is even with companies of one, companies of two, you still have to have those leadership capabilities. And the way I've started to relook at that, maybe reframe it, is mindset. And I look back early in my career, it was all about, why can't I do this? Why can't we do this? Why can't we redo that distribution center? It's dumb that we're doing this way. But slowly over time, it became, yeah, I think I can make this a little bit better. And I stopped asking why. And what I got back in the last couple of years is, why can't I do this? Why can't I start a community? I have no idea. Why can't I start a podcast? I don't know anything about podcasts, right? And so it's a reframing. And I think leadership, and it doesn't have to be a big team, right? Because we've got networks and folks, and leadership, I think, is more of a personal, and again, you leading a big team, yes, you need leadership skills, get people motivated, but man, you got to motivate yourself first. You can't even lead yourself, then it's going to be really hard to even get a smaller team on board, or in the case, if you have to bring a couple of fractionals into piece, you got to have people to do that. So I, personally, the way I started looking, I had to take that step back, because I've always managed teams, but I had those limiting beliefs again. I'm like, why do I just, so my mantra this year was, all right, I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to do it. And if it doesn't work, I can come back, right? It's not the end of the world. And so I think it was reframing my personal leadership, that I need to lead me and maybe my family or life, those types of things first, before I even worry about what I'm doing with other folks. And I think that's tying that back to big corporate or corporate America, we spend a lot of time thinking about leadership of the teams that we're managing, or if we're managing teams, but we don't think about ourselves, our lives, or those types of things. So again, personally, I've reframed that just because I think we're going to become more and more, leaders of one, right? And most of us aren't very good at leading ourselves, let alone other folks. So I don't know if that answered your question, or we can maybe take it in a different direction. But
absolutely, 100%, love it. There is something that has been happening, funny enough, earlier in March, about a month ago, about Happy Women's Day and that sort of thing. And there's a little bit of a divisive message out there in terms of women versus men and everything in between. Like, it's easier for men to make it, it's harder for women to make it, and all that. When you think about leaving the 9 to 5 and moving to working on your own, what is the lay of the land that you've seen around you in terms of I'm a woman versus I'm a man? Is it easier, harder? What is it that you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because never been asked that too. I'd never thought about that, but it seems, in the solo world, right, that we leave, I don't see a difference. And maybe that's, more of a personal, I've got 3 daughters. And so it's been more of a, I've always been a fan of, if you can do the job, I don't care, right? This whole male female thing, I don't get it. Right? Either you have the skills, you can do the job, or you can't. But I think now that I think about it, within my network or even in the community, it's definitely more female than male. And they may have figured it out first, and maybe they got to that breaking point first that said, I'm not putting up with this crap anymore. I've got to carve my own path. I'm going my own way. And probably led the charge earlier, especially now that I think about it. Again, very small sample size, but a lot of the folks, the corporate escapees from 5+ years ago, 10+ years, almost all of them were female, which is interesting now that I think about it. But yeah, I think it's a much more, and again, I may be wrong, an even playing field, right? That nobody cares. If you've got the skill, these companies need you to do the job. That it's not the issue. But I'd love your perspective. Are you curious what you're seeing in that space?
Yeah, to me, I'm not in any way dismissing some women who definitely have experienced this divisiveness in the culture of the company they worked for, and
Sure.
They've gone through a very rough patch. Having said that, to me, what I think is usually that we need to elevate the message, because I think that the big division is between the feminine and the masculine energy that we both carry in ourselves. And this is where things start to be a little bit tricky, because we all have both, regardless whether we're a man or a woman. And I think over the past few decades, and there has been more of a display of the false masculine in the work environment, in the society, whether in the family or at work. And it's been completely distorted. Like, you have to be wearing this power mask, and you have to make sure that, you're very authoritarian, you're very aggressive or assertive, for making it less of a aggressive term. And this is how people are going to respect you. I want to work with you. And you have to be really dominant in the way you approach life. And whoever is more dominant is going to crush everyone else, which is very much the display of what we call the false masculine. It's a big mask that is being worn. So I think at the moment, what's beautiful is to see some people who are realizing that it's okay to cry. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to just, when you make mistakes, dust yourself off and stand up and move again, and let people know what is it that you've experienced, the lesson that you've learned, both ways, and embracing both, because some people are really great at emotions, feelings, connecting with others, connecting with themselves. Some people are great also at being goal-focused, result-oriented, and learning really to embrace both sides. This is in terms of a perspective of what we've been experiencing at the big mix-up between masculine versus feminine.
Right.
And in terms of advantages, I think it's funny how the tables have turned now. I think for women, it gives them a lot of flexibility, especially if they want to also focus at being moms. Not all women want to be moms, and definitely that's okay. It gives them more flexibility to still find that what they're doing is meaningful, that they still can be a mom and something else. And if they don't want to be in the workforce, well, good on them also, because I think, I'm not sure about you and your wife, but the biggest, most challenging role that I've ever had is to be a mom.
Yeah.
People say business. Honestly, no, business is a piece of cake.
Right. That's easy. That's the vacation.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you're right on. It's super interesting because, again, I haven't had this conversation with anybody before, but the one thing that I would say is, again, especially fractional, right? Because companies that are bringing you in for your expertise in a leadership type of a role, it's all the good bits of corporate and none of the bad, right? So there's no politics. They don't bring you into unnecessary meetings. So it really doesn't matter. You don't have to fight against anybody, right? It's just your experience in plugging it in. So I think from that case, it just makes more sense. I mean, that's why a corporate part of it it gets too big, it's political, and you're right. It's just everybody, just all the wrong thing. It's just what we did. And I think about the course of my career. I wish I would have done this 20 years ago, but you know what? The timing wasn't right. I didn't learn the right lessons or whatever it is. But I think we're finally getting to a place, and I do believe that the organizations that are going to be successful going forward are just going to focus on those outcomes, right? It's not going to be the posturing. It's not going to be the politics. It's not going to be that other crap. Because if you get caught up in that, it's just inefficient. And the organizations of the future, they're going to be high performing, aren't going to care, right? They're like, hey, we've got a skill set. We're all fighting towards this same common goal. We're all, I use the Super Friends, analogy, right? That we've got folks, right, from leadership in your case, or we've got somebody that's really strong at project or product marketing, or we need somebody that's social media. You can put a team together that goes in and takes care of these things. And it's really about just the outcomes. Because these companies, guess what? They don't want to pay for the inefficient times. They only want the good stuff. And so maybe an indirect positive outcome of all this is it does level the playing field and takes all that other crap, out of this thing. So, that's really interesting. We'll see. I think I'm right on that, but we'll find out.
I love what you shared around this, because there's something also that I find that is something that people come with when they want to leave their 9 to 5 and start their own business, is that it feels like they've been going for ambition all the time. Like, the more I make money, the more I'm significant in this society, and the more I stand out and people are going to take me seriously, as if how much money I make equals how worthy I am. Like, there's this sort of equation that is happening by default in the back of their mind. And if I stop working in my 9 to 5, I'm going to sort of start from scratch, which, definitely we're going to have to take a step back to take 10 steps forward. And it's like, oh, what are people going to say about me, or that sort of thing. And if I'm not bringing money back home, then I'm not going to be worthy. And there is a sort of self-esteem that starts to fluctuate depending on how much money we're making. And I think that what you just shared is the importance to embrace the meaning of life beyond the professional slice of the pie, because there's a whole lot of other things that I want to take into consideration to have this sense of freedom and knowing how is it they want to create and design our life.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. And I think, interesting, and maybe it's just because the bubble I'm in, or the world and the people I'm around now, I thought when I started this that the majority of folks would say, and I think I even asked you this on the podcast, that it was about the money, right? I'm going solo because I can make more money, I can control my future. But, it's really around what I thought was I started with the 3 F's, right? The freedom, the flexibility, and the financial independence. But the deeper I get, and again, more on a personal basis, right? There's fulfillment, there's I use another F with fitness, but mental health and physical health and fun, right? So those are all a big equation that no two people are going to be the same. And the other thing that I found interesting is that the bigger currency instead of money is time, right? I want more time to do what I want to do, and I'm richer for it if I can still afford to do and pay what I need to pay, but then, not work on Fridays, or, take 2 months off in the summer to spend with my family to go international to do that. I think people, at least the folks, again, and maybe our circle, we're starting to see the value of that so much more than what you had talked about, which, not that long ago, it was chasing the money and we defined our worth by dollars, but time is slowly, I think people are realizing that time, you can't get it back, right? You can always make another dollar, but you can't get an hour back. So I don't know, maybe that's more personal, but I think the more and more people that I talk to and interview, it's becoming more universal, I guess. Or maybe, again, it could be just the group of folks that I'm starting to engage more with, but we appreciate kind of the same things and not competing on, just the dollar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important to surround ourselves with the right people. And there's this transition phase that happens when we leave the 9-to-5 world and start going into business, where things start to shift. But I think in my experience, I had to be okay with swimming underwater for a while, like without really taking a breath, like, you know what, just gonna do the hard yards. Like it's a short-term pain, but for a long-term game, like just like let's gain. So let's really be okay with swimming underwater for a while.
Yeah, what's a good analogy for that? And again, I can't take credit for it, but it's like when we have our own businesses, which is what we do now, right? There's times when you have to use the car analogy. Sometimes you got to put your foot on the gas, right? You've got to go hard. We're working 12 hours, 14 hours a day just because of it. There's times where we coast, right? We don't have to do anything. We're just going through. And there's time we put our foot on the brake just to stop and take a break. But, in the corporate world, you can't do that. That's not your choice to do any of those three. Our world, we can now actually do that. And so what I don't want people to think is it's just super easy. Yeah, quit corporate, you'll get a job or a fractional job and do it. You still got to work. But what I tell people is you're working for you now, right? The effort that you're putting in is for you, your family, or whatever your goals are, and not somebody else's goals. So, it's like I said, I wouldn't change it. I wish I would have figured this out a long time ago, but that's why we're just starting the mission with Corporate Escapees to say, hey, man, if you're not happy with what you're doing, there is a path forward. And when you're ready, there's people here to help you do that.
Absolutely. And I love the initiative that you just created. I think it was earlier last month, and I'm part of it. Thank you for inviting me to join you guys. Can you tell us more about it, like the listeners that are not aware of what I'm talking about, and how is it that you came up with the idea and what's the purpose of it?
Yeah. So again, it's outside of my comfort zone, but it's the new me that says, hey, I'm just going to go for it. And it was around the podcast, I finally settled. I rebranded it a couple times, with focusing on business owners. But when I finally figured out it was, I want to, work with more people like me, the corporate escapees. We were there, right? We're not looking to build, like you said, venture capital type firms. Maybe some are, and that's fine. Go hit those passions. But then the other thing I realized, that I was lucky that I wasn't doing this alone, that I did have some support in a network, but there's a lot of folks that don't. So I'm like, well, instead of just being cliche and starting a community, I decided to start what we call the Corporate Escapee Collective, which is basically a free community for anybody that's left or, and quite honestly, thinking about leaving corporate and just wants to be around other people that are in the same position. And our only rule is, I don't know if you can say in your pod, no assholes allowed, right? We only have good people there. You can take me out, but we wanted people to support each other, right? And I think the one thing that everybody that's joined so far realizes that it's an abundance world, right? It's not drawing a blank, right? It's not, there's
Scarcity.
not a set amount of, right?
Scarcity mindset.
Yeah, thank you. It's getting late here in Chicago, but there's enough. If there's so much work for everybody, that if we can just help each other and provide that support to other people, and that's what it is, right? There's no real obligations, and so, like I said, I'm just trying to get more and more people who are on the fence afraid to take the lump, come on in, chat with us. We provide different types of resources for folks. And if you're thinking about, come listen to the podcast, shameless plug that, we bring in people. And my whole point with both of it is just to show people what's possible, right? I mean, I think that's part of it is we think so limited sometimes that with the podcast and say, hey, there's 100 things you can do. We're just going to give you some options that people who did this and when they did that and how they did it. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but if you get a few ideas and you connect with a couple of people, we're all going to be better off.
It's a win-win. Yeah. It's awesome. It's such a great win. At the beginning, there's a lot of finding our feet, like what is it that we stand for? Who are our people? Try this, try that, and then, oh, that's the tribe. Or sometimes we create our own, which you did with the group, which is awesome. Usually I ask my guests this question because I'm a big fan of good books, good podcasts, good resources. Again, to find this one idea that will start to shift things for me as I move forward, because we never arrive, right? It's an ongoing growth journey. What is a book or a podcast that you have recently come across that you would recommend and why?
Oh, interesting. Well, the one thing I kind of tell people that, over the since I started the podcast, I probably read close to 100 books now, because when I have authors on the podcast, my commitment is I will read your book before you come on, because if you don't, then it's just, how can I ask you questions? But I think so I've got a ton of recommendations, but I think the two for the audience, for people that are thinking about going solo or escaping the corporate world, is the one is Who Not How by I actually have it here. I was just referencing it earlier, so I don't know if people are looking.
Who Not How. Who Not How. Yeah.
Dan Sullivan, and the whole concept here was around entrepreneurs and small business owners, the people that we service with Fractional, too often are asking, how do I get this done? How do I do this? How do I do this? And too often, it never gets done, or it gets done poorly. And their whole concept was, go find a who, because there's a who out there that loves to do this job, that does it really well, so you don't have to worry about it. So the whole idea, kind of the framework of the ecosystem or the Fractional, is, hey, go find those who's to build this out, is one. And then the other one that kind of changed it for me, so I'm going to give you two. A bonus one is
beautiful. Thank you.
You can see all my stickies on this one. The Process is the Product. And again, it was a former NBA player turned author, and what he had discovered was he needed to find a system or process to get the deep work done, or his good creative work done, or the deep thinking work. And without doing it, he was sporadic. He procrastinated these other things. And so when I read his book, I'm like, ding, ding, this is exactly what I was missing. I needed that process. And so it kind of rechanged the way I approach work. And I think one of the biggest things, if you go from corporate to your own, is, man, you have your own to-do list and you have to prioritize everything. It's all on you. And so between these two books, it was super helpful for me to kind of get control of what I'm doing and what I want to do. And like I said, I share the who, not how with business owners to say, man, don't do this yourself. There's people, we can help you find the people to do it. So maybe a little more than you were looking for, but those would be the two I would definitely highly recommend.
This is so good. Thank you so much for being generous. I love it. I could spend hours having conversations around books and how it actually is impacting your life and business. It's always great to actually use someone else's wisdom and then elevate it, change it, like for whatever it suits us. So if you were to throw a 30-day challenge, Brett, a challenge for people who are maybe thinking about leaving their 9-to-5, maybe starting a gig on the side, something along those lines, what would that challenge be? Let's say 30-day challenge.
I think it would be have 5 conversations. Like if you were normally so flip it, say, all right, I think my job may be ending, or I'm looking for a new job. I'm not happy. And if they're listening to this podcast and they're still listening, they're probably not happy. And instead of, or in addition to, when you're networking with folks, talk about being available for fractional work, right? I think that's one of the biggest things, is have the conversation. I think you'll be surprised at the opportunities that are out there. But the thing that maybe I would challenge you to do first in the next 30 days is really decide what you want. It sounds easy, but it's not. I mean, that's one of the first things I do with some of the folks that I coach is I'm like, we're going to spend the first 2 weeks figuring out what is it exactly you want. Well, I want to make more money. Is that really it? No. Right. What do you want in 2 months, 2 years, 5 years, and not just in work, in life? And that's going to take you 30 days. So I think one is, as you're networking, talking to people, see if there's, an appetite out there for your skill set, which I'm going to bet that there is. If you're not talking to the right people, we can help you. But two, wherever you are, think about what you want. And it may change in 5 years, but if you don't know what you want, then you're not driving towards anything. And like I said, I think a lot of us in corporate for years just mindlessly followed the path with not really thinking what we wanted. We think we wanted that next promotion. That had nothing to do with life. I'll give you one last story if we've got time.
Go for it.
All right. So a woman I worked with in my last corporate world, and she's been on the podcast a couple times, right? She training and development, really good, hard charging, getting burned out in corporate, decided to start her own company. And what she really wanted was to take the month of August off to go climbing, wherever it was, international. She's going to take that month of August off. So she built a company around that. And guess what? To this day, she still takes that month off. Her clients know she's going to be out of pocket for this month. And she achieved it. And that just kind of reframed it for me. I'm like, man, I've been thinking about this wrong. So you don't have to climb, but I would challenge people in the next 30 days, just map out what is it you really, really want, and not alone, right? Depending on who your support group, your family, whatever it is, how does that all tie together? So maybe
what's
more
your
than
own version
30
of
days.
climbing for you?
Exactly.
What is your own version of climbing? Yeah. What does it look like for you? Yeah, I can see. Well, it depends. Different people are going to be at different stages. So I think what I love about what you shared is that you're combining, again, to bring back home the conversation we had around feminine and masculine. So go and talk to people. This is the feminine energy. Have conversations, see what's in the market, the lay of the land, just test drive your pitch, see what's the appetite there, who could be potentially your clients. And based on that, go back to the drawing board, use the make sense logic strategy, which is more of the masculine energy, and have a look at how you're going to marry both to succeed. And then once you start gaining more clarity, you can start to put some milestones like 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, that sort of thing. And then creativity is feminine again. What is your own version of climbing, and what is the life that you're aiming towards? It's how is it that we can marry beautifully those two energy styles to get where we want. And as we are embracing the journey and enjoying and learning from it, which is feminine, we are also keeping our eyes on the prize, so-called the goal that we're looking for. And sometimes it might change as we start seeing things from a different perspective. And that's the whole idea. Love it. So Brett, for those of you guys who are listening right now, thank you so much again for being with us. And for those of you who are going to have a look at the replay, good on you for investing time to listen to this conversation and finding the one idea that is going to create a massive change in your life. How is it, Brett, that people can connect with you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
I think the two best ways, one is LinkedIn, right? I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I work with businesses, so I've really embraced that. So Brett Trainor at LinkedIn.com. And then also just send me an email, Brett Trainor, at BrettTrainor.com. So super simple. And I said, no obligation. I'm more than happy to have conversations with anybody right now. It's actually more fulfilling just having conversations with folks. So don't be afraid to ask. I'll give you honest opinion. And what you're talking about with that journey when I started, it's just amazing how the last 2 years has opened my eyes to everything, right? I used to think it was just, make more money, do this, but I'm like, shit, life's way much more than this. And I kind of was living it, but it wasn't intentional. Now everything's intentional. So anyway, I like
a whole new level. Yeah, love it. Yeah. We can go for another podcast for this one.
I can talk to you forever. So I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Brett, for having this conversation with me. It's been awesome talking to you today.
Always my pleasure. And thanks for having me, and look forward to connecting here in the near future.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thanks, Carol.